Okay, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Yay. Hi, guys. I'm Jules, and I have a really special guest here. So, 2-minute rundown
Yeah.
who you are, how you know me, how we met.
Okay. I love this. So my name is Dama. I met Julian at the gym. I want to say that he was doing a hack squat press, and I'm pretty sure that this is it. And so keep in mind, as a girl, I get it, people will say oh, men are terrible, all they do is stare at asses at the girl. I'm so sorry, but I'm just as bad as men. When I see a girl with a nice ass, I'm gonna stare in appreciation.
Oh, me too.
Because it's yeah, girl, you did that. And so Julian was doing these squats, and I was in the corner of my eye, damn, that guy has a fat ass. I was I need to say something. And I feel that's the first thing that
You're
I said.
right.
Yeah,
I remember now.
You're you objectified me. I'm yeah, I did, but you looked so good. And I remember
I don't mind.
Right? And we were in between breaks, and I think I was on the leg press next to you, and then you looked back, and I just hey, I need to just tell you something. Your ass is insane.
You know what? Now that you mention it, I do remember because it was a Thursday.
Yeah.
And Thursdays, I go to the gym in the mornings.
Yeah,
and they're my
was.
leg days.
Mm-hmm.
Thursdays are my leg days.
Yeah.
And you know what? I remember now. Because
Yeah.
I was thinking, I was when was the first time we ever talked?
Yeah.
I remember.
It was a year ago. I want to say it was last summer-ish, around that time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then, and we exchanged numbers, or Instagrammed, I think. And then later on, we exchanged numbers. And I just feel throughout our interactions at the gym, we would have really good conversations. I just felt every time I spoke to you, the convo wouldn't just be 5 minutes. It would extend.
Oh yeah.
But it was so nice because we had such similar mindsets and our perspectives on growth and on life. And I really enjoyed that, having those conversations with you. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
Well, there was two scenarios that I remember. One where you were at the gym and you were just distraught.
Yes.
I remember specifically you were on the Stairmaster, and I can just not only sense it in your energy from a distance, but I knew that a friend just needs a hug.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And you know what? I honestly feel that moment became such a core memory of mine because I literally was just kind of keeping my head down on the Stairmaster, but I could feel I don't know, I just I wanted to cry. And then when I came off the Stairmaster and you just hugged me, I was that was everything. Truly, that to me was the whole definition, to be loved is to be seen. Because in my head, I thought nobody's paying attention to me.
Oh yeah.
And so for you to do that meant a lot. And I think even after that moment, you became more ingrained in my life as a person who I can trust with myself.
Right. Because sometimes I don't need to be told added information.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just need physical affirmation.
Yeah.
Sometimes a hug is enough.
1000%.
Because in times of when I'm processing something, I don't necessarily want to hear the opinions of others.
Yeah.
That's why I always ask, what do you need from me?
Yeah.
And so I knew at that moment what you needed.
Yeah.
And I remember another time is when I was upset about something.
Yeah.
And I remember I was doing some free weights, I was doing biceps, I think.
I remember.
And this was winter time when I was at the time dating my boyfriend.
Yeah, I remember.
And I was just so upset about something, and you were there for me.
Yeah.
Now that's a core memory of mine.
Really?
Yeah, just because I knew you would be someone that was uplifting and encouraging and very empathetic with knowing how to manage and operate through struggles.
Yeah, I remember hugging you, and I feel with us, we're so in tune with our emotions. I know each time that I've hugged you, we've always just cried.
Yeah.
And I'm sure to other people what are they
They're
doing?
what are they doing?
Yeah, hugging and crying at the gym. You don't get it. This is therapy for us. Chill. You go do your leg press. We're gonna be here hugging.
Yeah, for sure. You don't really see that often.
You don't, honestly. I think a lot of the time people nowadays just forget that we're human. We get so focused on our day-to-day things, and we just forget sometimes a hug is all someone needs, or even just a smile, and just offering that to somebody. It literally costs you nothing at all to just be nice.
And just think about how many other people are going every day at the gym, knowing how all the shit that they're going through, and we would never know.
Literally, I think about that all the time, because you go to the gym, and I mean, I don't know for your experience, but for me, I go at different times, but surprisingly I see the same people Like I could go in the morning, same people. I could go like at 7 p.m. on a random Thursday, same people.
Same people.
And it's, you know, and it's like it gets to a point where you're just like kind of curious about like, oh, what's going on in your life? Because like I see you often, but like I don't know anything about you, but like you're in my life to an extent, you know. And yeah, I get that we're all just like living our own complex lives, and that's the crazy part about life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've also noticed this, like, and this is just me really being really observant.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm like in a very high tense state of mind,
Yeah.
my workouts become very extreme. Like what I mean by that is like, if you ever like find me like running at like a very abnormal pace,
Yeah.
I need to blow off a lot of steam.
Yeah.
You know, I'm
I
not just
do.
doing it just because I feel fat.
Yeah.
Even though
Like, it's not a body dysmorphia thing right now, I swear.
Yeah, it is. Sometimes I feel fat, and so I'm like, but I've noticed that despite, you know, doing like an actual generalized weight training,
Yeah.
there's a difference between weight training
Yeah.
and you need to blow off some steam.
1000%. I actually signed up for the boxing club over in East Village in downtown.
Okay.
Specifically for that, because I got to a point in my life where I just felt like I kind of had lost my passion for movement, and I was just going to the gym, and it almost felt like I was punishing my body, and like I just felt like I wasn't in it. Like my relationship with my body wasn't like, it wasn't getting to a place where I wanted it. It just, I feel like I was attacking myself constantly. And so a friend told me, like, maybe you just need to find like a different form of movement. And at that time, my sister and her boyfriend had just joined that gym, and they were like hyping it up, like, you're gonna love it. It's like so much fun. Like you just get all like your aggression out, like punching the bag. And I was like, oh no, like I guess. I went my first class and I loved it. I was hooked. Like you just get, like, I'm not saying like being aggressive is like the answer, but I'm saying like that motion of like just being able to go all out on something and like release any tension, and like with no intention to like change your body or physique. It's just primarily like you and like your feelings, and like using that kind of as like motivation. And it also helped to spark my passion for movement again. And I feel like now I'm kind of like approaching the gym and exercise from a more holistic perspective, instead of just like, I don't like this, I'm gonna do this to change that. Or like, it's not much of like a fix it. It's more of like a, this is adding value to my life in this way.
Right. Yeah. So I want to talk about codependency.
Yes.
Because I was trying to figure out like who the best person to talk to about this.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're really wise.
Oh, thank you.
And you're really gracious.
Thank you.
And I feel like you have some experience too
I
on
do.
codependency. And so pretty much I just wanted to just pick your brain on what you feel like codependency is for you, what your experience has been on codependency, how you have found solutions, because at least for a man, we depend on a lot. Like we, in some aspects, healthy ways of, you know, finding hobbies like the gym, finding, you know, going to watch like the sunset, or going for a walk, or playing an instrument, are like healthy ways to cope through something. But I feel like a lot of men have a tendency of codepending on things that are satisfactory, like drugs or girls, or the idea of attention, or validation. I feel like seeking validation is a huge codependency.
1000%.
You know, women or men look towards like pornography, you know, so there's so much that I feel like a lot of us men have a tendency of codepending, and we find it very harmless, because we're just like, okay, well, it's helping me, but like it's just like a band-aid.
Exactly, for like a deeper wound. Well, I think for me, the way that I've experienced codependency was being codependent on a person. And to me, when you are codependent, it's sort of like you're giving up a piece of your identity. At least that's how it was when it manifested in my life. It was with my first boyfriend ever. I wasn't like crazy young going into that relationship. I was around 18 going on 19. But at that time, like looking back on it now, I recognize like those were my formative years. Like I had just come out of high school. It was in my freshman year at college. I was still like trying to navigate like, who am I as a person, and what are my values, my beliefs. And I jumped into this long-term relationship really early on. And, you know, this individual was also in his formative years. He was 21 at the time. And again, like, I'm sure, like, for men, that's probably, like, the equivalent of, like, our 18-year-old. And so he was also trying to figure out who he was as a person and so forth. And along the way, we kind of just, like, lost our ability to trust ourselves. And for me, that's what codependency looked like. I no longer felt comfortable or safe doing things by myself. I needed to do things with the company of him always. And it wasn't even like a he was controlling me type of thing, but I hadn't learned how to trust myself. I hadn't gone through those, because I do think it's important, especially as a girl, that you go through a period of just singlehood. Even if that is like in college, or if you just like live alone or something, but you need to go through a moment in your life where you're by yourself, because you're kind of forced to see what you're capable of, and you're forced to see like what your skills are and like where you need to grow as a person. I didn't have that. I didn't give myself that time. Like, as soon as I graduated high school, I went straight into like a long-term relationship, and I never got to experience like that singlehood for myself, and, you know, explore who I was as a person outside of school, or like, not because I was still in school, but like outside of like the typical like standard school. And so that's what that looked like for me. I gave up my identity. I lost a lot of my motivation for life. Prior to that relationship, I was very on like the go mode. Like, I knew what I wanted out of college, what I wanted to be when I got older and so forth, like my career. And then that relationship really derailed me, because now my focus was this other individual, and I started prioritizing their needs over my own. And at that time, I didn't even notice that I was doing it. And in my head, I thought I was just being a nurturing girlfriend. Looking back on it now, I just realized like I had made this individual my entire identity. Like, he was in a place where he needed a bit more help than most people, to like just develop as a person, because like of just his upbringing. And I'm not saying this like for every man or across the board, like who grows up in like a single parent household, but that's what it was for him. He had grown up in a single parent household with no dad. So he lacked that male figure in his life, and he needed a lot of direction in life, because he also didn't go to any schools where they were encouraged to pursue higher education, and he didn't really know what he wanted out of life. So to me, in my head, I made sort of like him my identity, and like me helping him my identity. And I became very codependent in that process, because then I couldn't do anything without him, because I just felt like this was like, it sounds so weird to say, but like this was like my comfort person. Like, this was like the person who I needed around constantly to like be able to do my own things.
Right. Yeah, I definitely feel like planning your entire life around your partner is a huge one.
Yeah.
Because it's happened to me before.
Yeah.
And it's like categorized as like one of the characteristics of being codependent. I know for me, like, I've planned all of my days, all of my schedules, all of my hours around my partner.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't do the same.
Yeah.
And that's how you know, oh, I have some sort of codependency on them, because they're still going their everyday life. Not to say that they're neglecting you, but they have more of a balance than you do. If you don't catch it in time, it becomes very detrimental to the relationship.
It does, 1000%. And I think like for me in that relationship, he was also very codependent on me. So like, luckily you had somebody who could kind of like keep like a check on you, like a checks and balance. Whereas for me, we both just became so codependent on one another. I don't think that we ever spent a day apart, like our entire relationship. Maybe like the most days we stayed apart was maybe like 2. And even that was like, we would still FaceTime every night and like fall asleep with like FaceTime calls, or like, you know, throughout the day, just because it was like, you got so used to this person being around all the time. And like, again, that codependency and not really putting any of like your own desires into play or into consideration.
Right. Another example that it shows on here that I found really significant was, you don't trust your own judgment, and you need a lot of reassurance. Reassurance is huge.
It is huge.
Seeking reassurance might extend outside of the relationship too, into work, friends, family, etc. I think that there is obviously a very healthy form of needing reassurance, but I feel like it starts to get a little hazy when your reassurance is coming from a place of like, I can't function if you're not giving me it. 100%. And I think that's something that I, you know, used to mistake in my relationship, because of course my number one love language is words of affirmation. I need words of affirmation. I need that reassurance. I also started to confuse giving myself self-affirmation. There were certain things that like I needed to be secure with myself before I can get it from anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think when you're secure in yourself, that words of affirmation comes very easily.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I think that could even play into a little bit of attachment styles, because I feel like for me, my attachment style, like specifically during that relationship, was anxious attachment. And I feel like that's for that reason my codependency was such an issue for me, was because for me, that was my way of getting my like reassurance that like this person was for me and that they loved me and that they weren't going to go anywhere, because I was just operating from like that fear of abandonment and like not wanting to be sort of thrown off the curb. So in my head, I thought maybe if I just give this person like my all, like my attention, my time, my energy, they'll never want to leave me. And it's that back to that fear of of abandonment. You said something that like also like hit a chord with me. Being able to what was it?
Like self-assure yourself.
Yeah, that to because I feel like that plays kind of in line with the idea of self-love. Like if you don't have love for yourself,
Oh yeah.
how are you going to be able to give that to somebody else, you know? And it's the same thing. If you're not secure within yourself, how are you going to be able to provide somebody else with the security within a relationship or even a friendship or anything, just knowing that you're there for that person if you don't even have the ability to trust yourself and your own abilities? And that's, to me, is important. It's a foundation to entering that secure attachment style and move out of those toxic traits of codependency, truly, because that's what they are. They create more harm than good in the long run.
Right. I'm sure like people are going to ask like, okay, well then what's the root of like codependency?
Yeah.
And of course, I always like to go back to the root of something.
Yeah.
And it always will go back to your childhood. And so as I was like doing some more research, I like analyzed like the way that you grew up would cause the way that you were either codependent with someone or not.
Yeah.
Either you were overly protective or you were
Yeah.
underly protective.
Yeah.
Overly protective meaning your parents, didn't allow you to do certain things. They restricted so much on you growing up. You weren't allowed to have a phone. You weren't allowed to go out, hang out with friends, And then on the flip side, underly protective, you got to do whatever the hell you wanted to do.
Exactly.
They didn't care what time you came home. They didn't care who you were hanging out with. They didn't care who you were interacting with, or what your grades were like in school. Like you didn't have structure.
Yeah.
And so I think all of those lead to the way that you would cope with things and the things that you depended on with people. If you didn't have a father figure or a mom to nurture you, you're going to depend on someone else.
Exactly.
You're going to cling on to that person.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's more of like that mother figure,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's with not good people.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's so interesting because you're so right. Because as children, like our parents are like the ones who are there to protect us. So to have parents who maybe don't play their role in the way that they're supposed to, it does, as we get older, I feel like that's where you hear that narrative of like mommy issues or like daddy issues, because you are on a quest to sort of look for that figure in your life and like you're seeking that nurturing. And you're right. Yeah, I can definitely see the relation between codependency and that, because once you find that person who's going to be your quote unquote daddy or your quote unquote mommy in like a non-sexual way, but I mean like providing you with that figure, it's very easy to want to do anything to keep them around. And again, that goes back to like releasing your own values and not standing in your power and doing what it takes to keep them from leaving, because now you finally found somebody to fill this role that you were missing your entire upbringing. And that's kind of like a callback to your inner child and giving them what they need. When I feel like in truth is kind of just recognizing that I've noticed that as we get older and we're on this path towards healing, we end up becoming the person that our inner child lacked. And so I feel like that's part of the process of moving out of codependency, is recognizing that you have the ability to self-soothe. And yes, you may not have had a mom or a dad in your life to give you that structure and that protection, but knowing that as you get older, you will be able to get the ability to provide that for yourself.
I know you had mentioned attachment styles.
Yeah.
I feel like we can do a whole episode
We really
on
could.
attachment styles.
Yeah.
But just briefly discussing attachment styles, because I I know we've discussed it through text,
Yeah.
and how like I know for myself, I have an anxious attachment
Yeah.
style, and it's so crazy because I'm reading this book on it's called How to Not Die Alone.
Oh, I think that's a movie or a show. I think it recently got made into a show on Hulu.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure because I saw it trending on TikTok where people were like just doing the most outrageous things at stores for like to connect with people almost, because it's like you don't want to end up alone. Like so I didn't watch like the show or anything, but I think that's like the synopsis or like the idea of it.
Well, it's a book that I found at Barnes and Noble.
Okay.
And it's about relationships,
Yeah.
and this psychologist wrote this book. I don't remember her name, but it's really cute. It's like the front cover has like 2 toothbrushes.
Aw.
I'm like, okay, cool.
That is cute because that's like, oh, like, let me leave a toothbrush at your house, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally. It's funny because I did that with my ex.
I did that. Well, my ex did that with me. He left I made him literally the first week. I made him bring his toothbrush and I made him leave it there.
That's cute. No, well, for mine is because so we both we're living with our parents, and so what I would do was in my bag I had like a toiletry bag because sometimes we'd stay at hotels, so I had to keep both of our toothbrushes in there for us just for whenever.
dying.
I know it was like our version of like a leave a toothbrush at my house type of thing.
Yeah. But I just finished reading the chapter
Yeah.
about attachment styles. And they did this experiment where they had a collective group of mothers
Yeah.
with their infant children from like 8 months to 12 months.
Okay.
And so what they did was they put all the moms in one room.
Yeah.
And they would exit the room to see how their child would react.
Yeah.
Of course, the children would start to cry. Some would wonder where the children,
Yeah.
where's my mom
Yeah.
is. And so they started to realize the anxious attachment babies
Yeah.
would cry.
Okay.
They would be confused where their mom is. When the mom came back, they would still cry,
Yeah.
and they would throw a fit before they felt comforted.
Oh, okay.
With the avoidant, the babies would cry,
Yeah.
they would stop crying, the mom would come back, and there was no reaction.
They're like, okay, cool.
They're like, okay, cool, whatever.
Yeah.
And the secured attachment babies
Yeah.
would cry in the beginning, stop crying while they were still away.
Yeah.
They felt secure. They would come back, and they're pretty much like, oh, hi, mom.
Aw,
Like type
like
of
happy, yeah,
reaction.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
oh, you're back. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And it was just so interesting to read that chapter because knowing me, I'm a brat. I'm a brat. I identify as a brat.
Self-awareness.
Self-awareness.
Is key.
Hey,
True.
I don't want to.
Honestly.
And so it's not just a trend.
It's who I am.
It's who I am.
It was before it was a trend.
It was before it was brat
No,
summer.
literally.
And I literally I put myself in that position, and I was telling myself as I was on the treadmill, I would have done the same exact thing that baby did.
Yeah.
My mom would come, and I would still throw a temper tantrum, like, go away.
Like, how dare you
Like,
leave?
how dare you leave me?
Yeah, literally.
And I started realizing, and of course they went section by section of why the babies reacted like this.
Yeah.
And just for me, being anxiously attached, I get very fearful of abandonment. I get very fearful of someone leaving me.
Yeah.
Avoidant people get very fearful of rejection.
1000%.
So they just act like nonchalant.
Yeah.
And secured, well, they're secure in themselves.
Yeah.
They know that everything's going to be fine. They
Yeah.
know that person's going to come back.
Yeah.
And the chapter was saying the reason why it's so hard in our day and age to start dating is because all these dating apps, most of the people are anxiously and avoidant people. And the way that the author was describing it is you won't really find secure people on dating apps because they're snatched real quick.
Exactly.
And I'm like, well, damn.
No, it's true. And like, it's funny that you mentioned that because also I feel like those apps, like specifically Hinge, they're, or not just Hinge, like Hinge, Tinder, Bumble,
All of them.
yeah, they're all truly just kind of feeding into your insecurities. They're that simple swipe and everything, like you kind of get a dopamine rush, like, oh, like somebody likes me, like I want it, like it's it's that seeking that validation, and that's what those apps are doing, is they're feeding off of it. And truthfully, it's making dating so much worse. Like, say what people want to say, like, oh no, social media and like was meant to connect people. Yes, at its core, I understand that that's what it's for, but the way that they've been structured in the algorithms and the way that people just want to play games, it's ruining truly like dating.
A mini challenger, because I feel like delete the apps.
Yeah.
I would say give yourself 2 weeks, delete the apps.
1000%.
Because the first chapter in that book,
yeah,
I'm gonna give you the book too. It's amazing.
It sounds good.
She talked about how dating apps are ruining our actual dating society.
1000%. And it goes, yeah, and it's also kind of instills in your mind like, oh, why would I want to like be with this person when I have like 50 people on Hinge that are giving me hearts or sending me likes?
You'll never find content because you like have all these people.
Exactly. And I feel like even that might do something to your psyche on a subconscious level, like that could fuel the anxious attachment style, because in your head you're thinking, well, if I'm thinking this, they're probably thinking the same thing, so they're probably not going to commit to me either way. And if they're already thinking about leaving, well, I don't want them to leave. And now you're acting out of, again, that fear of abandonment, and that is probably going to trigger your triggers of like anxiety, and you're going to want to seek their validation. And that's just, it's a vicious cycle, truthfully.
I think too, people have become too dependent on these apps.
Yeah.
And we've lost our sense of like just actually talking to someone else.
Yeah.
I feel like these digital applications have ruined the excitement of finding true connection organically.
1000%.
Because if you've noticed, have you ever had an experience where you've organically, you didn't even need your phone at the slightest, where you organically met someone either at the bar or with some friends or at work? At least for me, like at work, I mean, I see so many people all the time. You know, I don't work in an office.
Exactly.
But if you have like access to working in a place in a more public environment, you know, it's so much more fulfilling.
It is.
Knowing that you found and connected with someone on a more deeper level intimately, rather than texting them, hey, how are you? Or hey, how are you doing? Or
I agree.
whatever.
Yeah. And I feel like that's what like those apps do, is they take away like the vulnerability of life. And like I see that same thing, like that plays out in my like field of work as well. Like I am constantly getting different people, and for me, when I'm able to connect with an individual, like that means everything. Like it's like those moments where we don't have our phones, we don't have anything, and like we just both happen to be in this moment in time on this earth, and we got to share this experience together, and like that's it. Like we don't have to exchange numbers or anything. It's just like having that moment of vulnerability and just humanness is comforting, truly.
Because it eliminates the complacency of what if they don't look like they do in person from these photos, or what if they don't like me. It's a lot of what ifs.
Exactly.
You don't have to worry about that, because you literally they're right in front of you.
You just met them.
You just met them. You know how they sound. You know how their mannerisms are. You know what they're about. You know, you can kind of get a quick rundown.
Exactly.
You know. So that's what I think.
I agree with everything on that. But back to the babies, what else happened? That got me really curious.
Well, at that point, they were just explaining the whole like psychological understanding of like why they cried the way they cried, why they reacted the way they reacted. And it really got me thinking about, obviously, more about myself, because anytime a description of anxious attachments described, I just resonate with it. So that's how I know I still have some sort of like anxious attachment style.
Like there's still triggers there.
That there's still triggers there. And you know, there are certain things that I want to work on myself before really getting into something more serious. And that's the reason why there's so many like anxious avoidant people.
And they always seem to find themselves in relationships. Like there's always going to be an anxious or an avoidant, or a hybrid, which is like a combination of both. And so I think like that example that you said about like the baby, like even after being comforted and like they're still throwing a tantrum. I see that so much in relationships. Like truthfully, like right now I'm in a state where I feel like I'm entering my secure attachment style, and I know this because now that I am dating, I've kind of just like detached to a healthy extent where I'm like, I'm not letting this person control if I'm happy or not. It's kind of just like, if you want to be in my life, this is what I have to offer. If that's not in alignment with what you want, okay, cool, let me know. And, you know, we can both part ways in a cordial manner, and I'll go find my person, you go find yours. Whereas in the past, I would be very much like very careful with what I'm saying. And I wanted to make sure that I was presenting like the most posh version of myself that I believed would be appealing to this individual. And even like with my first ex, like when I was 19, even like during moments where I felt like, oh, does he still like me? Does he still love me? Like, does he still want to be with me? Even after he would give me that reassurance, a part of me was like, I need more. Like, I need a bigger form of reassurance. Like, I don't know what it is. Like, it wasn't enough for me. And like looking back on it now, I just realized like I wasn't secure within myself to know that I had myself at the end of the day, and I was looking for that security through somebody else. And I feel like that goes kind of like to add to that comment that you made earlier, that affects a relationship. And I'm like, yeah, because now you're expecting so much out of one person. And that's not to say that you shouldn't have standards, because you should. But what I'm trying to say is that puts a lot of pressure on that individual, because now then they're worried about, well, was that enough for her? Was that enough for him? Like, am I doing too little? Am I not doing enough? Like, and then they become very anxious too. And then they start questioning their ability to love. And they start questioning if they're being a good enough partner for you. And then that could just spiral into so many other things, and like bickering and arguments and just become a much bigger problem than it has to be, because a lot of this can just be resolved with open communication, just being vulnerable with one another and be like, hey, I struggle with anxious attachment, and like, to me, this is how I need to be made to feel secure in a relationship. I am actively challenging these thoughts, but if you could just assist me in this manner whenever you notice them flaring up, I would appreciate that. And like likewise, an avoidant, I don't resonate with avoidance, because I don't consider myself an avoidant. I think I feel too much.
Yeah, I feel way too much.
Yeah, so I wouldn't really know how an avoidant would challenge those thoughts. Maybe they could verbalize like, hey, I may come across in this way to you, but just know that I do care, and I will do my best to reassure you when you need to be reassured. And
one thing I learned about avoidance, they don't want to lose their ability of independence.
I was going to say that, independence, huh? Yeah.
They feel like if their independence is in jeopardy, they tend to
retract. Yeah, 1000%. And it's so interesting that you mentioned that, because I was actually having a conversation with my therapist this morning about this, and I was telling her that the other day I was journaling in regards to relationships, and I was trying to figure out if what I wanted in life right now was a relationship, because I've just like came out of a not a long relationship. It was like a 3 month thing, but that relationship really opened my eyes to my emotional availability. And coming out of that, I started to question, am I even emotionally available to be with a person? Or like, do I even want a relationship? And I started to kind of explore, like, what does a relationship look like? Like, what does a relationship mean to me? Like, what do I associate with a relationship? And I instantly started getting like negative feelings about a relationship. And I started feeling like, well, if I'm in a relationship, I'm giving up my autonomy. I'm giving up my independence. I'm giving up my dreams, my aspirations, my will, my desire to put myself first. And as I was writing this down, I started realizing like, whoa, this is a limiting belief on itself. Because truthfully, at its core, a relationship is meant to add value into your life. It's not supposed to take away from you. And if you believe that that's what a relationship is going to do to you, it's probably because you're lacking something within you. You're not secure within yourself yet, and you're looking for a relationship to fill a hole that you have.
Right.
And truthfully, if that's where you are in life, I don't think you should be in a relationship. And like, because you're going to do more harm to yourself in the long run, because you're going to start to develop behavioral and thought patterns that are going to be harder to break down the line. And so when I started exploring this within myself, I was like, okay, this is interesting. And I started to think back, well, this makes sense, because in my first like long-term relationship, I was very codependent on a person who in that process, I lost my autonomy and I lost my desire to make my dreams come true. And that's why for me, I started to associate relationships as sort of stripping me of that independence. But weirdly enough, I still wouldn't consider myself an avoidant. Mm-hmm. I would say I have an anxious attachment style with a tendency to run away. So I think that's what maybe I am, a hybrid, because when things, when things get rough, I have like and I'm actively challenging that behavior because I'm not okay with it. I know that it does way more harm in like relationships than good. Is that when things start to feel like they're hitting the fan, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna step out. Like I need a minute for myself, or like just I need to isolate just for a little bit, because in my head I'm like, that's what I would do when I was little. Whenever anything got hard, I'd just go to my room and I'd color, I'd play with my toys, and like that brought me comfort. And so that translates into now my adulthood. But I recognize like that's also not, and like that's not a behavioral pattern that's going to help me become secure within myself. Like I also need to learn how to communicate and how to be vulnerable with people.
I love how you mentioned how you recognize when you were a child,
Yeah.
you know, you would go to your room
Yeah.
and you would just isolate yourself.
Yeah.
One of the things that I find really interesting, of course, as we're children, it's a little bit more of a childlike, you know, coping mechanism.
Yeah.
But as adults, kind of a lot more messier.
Yeah.
Our coping isn't coloring or
Yeah.
just sitting watching TV.
Yeah.
It's extreme.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's something that should be recognized, because it's okay to acknowledge, like, I've done some pretty crazy things and that I'm not proud of.
Yeah.
And the way that I cope with things isn't the best.
Yeah.
But these are the action plans that I have to change that. You know?
Yeah.
And I feel like adulthood is just very intense. And I feel like, especially with men wanting to compare themselves to other men,
Yeah.
you know, what can I do to be just like him?
Yeah.
Well, you weren't really supposed to be like him. So I find that to be something really significant, because of course when we're children, we don't really seem it as harmless. We're like, okay, well, I'm just gonna go to my room then. Like, you're annoying.
No, literally. And I think that's what I would do. And I'd be like, you know what? I don't want to be around like mom and dad. Like they're getting me in trouble. Like I'm just gonna go to my room. And like in my head, I'm like, oh, this is nice. Like my room is nice. Like I can enjoy my time here. But as an adult, it's like, that's not a good thing, because you're walking away from problems, and that's leaving your partner alone to handle the things. And that's not fair to them either, because that's not you being a partner. That's just you being immature.
It's crazy because I feel, just analyzing my life, when I was more of a younger adult, I was a lot more of an avoidant person. 100%. I didn't like to resolve conflict. I didn't like to be in a situation where I felt like my independence was at stake. I loved being alone. I didn't like feeling like, I didn't ever want to put myself in a position where I was going to feel rejected. And so these are like common things that an avoidant attachment person would do.
1000%.
But as I started to really analyze and process and really feel my emotions, it kind of was like segueing into another side of me that I didn't know, but that still wasn't secure. You know?
I do. Yeah. I think it takes time, because both attachment styles are so complex. I want to argue that well, I think they're both complex in their own, actually. And I feel like that's what it's a lot harder to become secure, to have a secure attachment style, because a lot of the anxious attachment style qualities are rooted in like lack of self-love, a lack of self-trust, an inability to trust your own judgment. A lot of these things take time to challenge, and a lot of the times they can only really be challenged, depending on the type of person you are, through evidence. And so if you're somebody who in your life has experienced a lot of moments that have shown you that when you trust your intuition, it leads to bad things, then that affects your ability to trust within yourself. And you kind of just have to wait around for more moments to come where you can challenge that narrative and move into a space of security within yourself. And that takes time. It takes a lot of grace. It takes a lot of trying again over and over, because it's important to remember, like, these behavioral patterns that we have, like, to get like a little academic on it, it's a science to it. Our brains are, the way that they're developed is through neural pathways. That's how these patterns are developed. And as we get older, our brains lose the ability to develop new neural pathways. So to break out of these already established pathways, it takes time, because one, we have our age playing against us, because now our brains aren't able to generate these new pathways at the rate that they used to when we were younger. That's why it's a lot easier to develop a personality or to develop habits when we're younger, because our brains are so much more moldable. Whereas as we're older, it takes a lot of consistency. And I feel like that's really the key, is to just be self-aware, to know where you need to make those changes, and to be consistently challenging any belief or thought pattern that isn't helping you.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. We could do a whole episode on neuroscience,
Thank
truthfully.
God.
Literally.
My dad would probably love that episode.
Yeah, it's...
My dad's so like into like learning about the brain. My
Yeah.
dad's like a total like educational man.
Yeah. It would be very Dr. or is that the Huberman Lab? It would be very Huberman Lab of us.
Thank God.
I would be, but no, truthfully, because like I don't want to like dismiss like, you know, like the psychology, but I feel like psychology in itself is a science. But like truthfully, like a lot of that plays a role. And I feel like if people were to understand that, like, hey, your brain is also kind of like playing against you almost, and you need to take that into consideration. That's why people tell you like you need to be consistent, and it's not going to be an overnight thing, because, and it's not just going to be an overnight thing because it's hard to let go, but it's hard to let go because you're literally rewiring your brain. You're forming a new behavioral pattern, and being secure, again, it takes so much. You need to learn how to love yourself, and the self-love journey. Oh my God.
Oh, that's a whole series on its own.
It's truly, it's so complex, and it's so rooted in so many different things, and learning to love yourself is an ongoing journey, like truthfully, because like for me at least, it's manifested like in my body image, it's manifested in like my relationship with food, it's manifested in the way that I move within relationship, the friendships that I keep, that I don't keep, etc. And it's just so complex. And so for that reason, I think it's very important that if you do recognize that you're somebody who has a codependency problem, analyze your attachment style, and then from there try to analyze like, okay, what is the biggest factor that's contributing to this attachment style? Is it a lack of self-trust in myself? Is it a lack of self-love? Is it a lack of self-judgment? Like, what is it? And at least that's how I've approached my healing, is I've noticed like what is causing the biggest dent, and I start challenging there. And at some point you'll start to notice that everything begins to overlap. But the more that you continue to challenge it, these overlaps become smaller and smaller, in the sense that it starts to take less effort to make those changes, because now you have a series of events that shows you that you are capable of change, and that itself is evidence, and it helps you to make quicker changes in those other areas in your life.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I love that. Okay, so I like to do what I call the challenger.
Okay.
I love to challenge people.
Yes, the best.
So what is your challenge for men to start today to help themselves recognize codependency and to start changing that today?
I would say my challenge would be to take a minute and to look at what your relationship is with yourself. How do you view yourself as a person, as an individual, and how does that align with what you want out of a relationship? If you can take a moment to recognize that, hey, I'm somebody who lacks self-esteem, that's probably going to lead you to be, again, that anxious attachment style, and you're going to become codependent on someone and seeking that validation for like letting them know that you are enough.
Right.
So taking that time to just sit with yourself, and it's an uncomfortable conversation to have, honestly, because in truth, we don't want to believe that we're insecure. Like, nobody wants to be told like you're insecure.
Everyone's insecure.
Exactly.
It's so crazy because
it is.
I have analyzed
Yeah.
the people that are the most attractive are the most insecure.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm not saying like I'm one of those people, but I had a conversation with my therapist about this when I like got out of my relationship, and I was telling her, I'm like, Erica, I'm like, you don't get it. I didn't say you don't get it. I think I said it's not that I think men suck, or that, you know, that men are terrible. That's not that, because I recognize that there's great men out there. I'm fully aware that I have really good friends who are in an amazing relationship with like 10 out of 10 men. But I told her, I'm like, the thing is that as a person, specifically as a girl, when you are conventionally attractive, the type of men that you tend to attract are men who are very exteriorly driven. They are very lustful, and the way that they will pursue you is in a way that is constantly appealing to your appearance. They will compliment your looks. They will make you kind of like, they will objectify you in such a way that really puts into question, like, was that all that I'm good for, my looks? And I told her specifically, I'm like,
That's huge.
it's huge. And I was telling her, I'm like, I have an engineering degree.
Okay.
I'm a software engineer.
Yeah.
I know that I'm a very intellectual person. I'm
You're
fully
very
aware of
well-rounded.
Yeah, no, I really am.
It's giving jack of all trades.
No,
babe.
literally.
I got the looks.
ADHD
I got the,
too, literally.
I got the degree.
And she has a little bit of tism for like
I'm
the
not
comedy.
like these other girls.
No, literally. And so I was telling her, I'm like, I know that I have a strong academic background. And for me, I've had moments where I've been talking to men and we start to get into these intellectual conversations. And I've literally had men stop in the middle of a conversation and be like, wow, you're actually smart. And like that to me was like, excuse me, like, so were you entertaining
Well, yeah, I'm not
me?
Elle Woods.
Yeah. No, even she was smart.
Even she was smart. So
Yeah,
you are
was-
Elle Woods.
Yeah,
Wait,
no,
you are. Look, you're so cute.
No, literally. And in my head, I'm thinking, okay, well, so were you just entertaining me this entire time because you thought I was just like a pretty thing to look at? And now that you know I have like a brain, quote unquote, like you felt the need to verbalize that?
So their motive was they were entertaining you because they thought you were cute.
Yeah.
But they couldn't wrap their minds around actually knowing and acknowledging that you actually had these intellectual qualities, which is why they questioned you.
Exactly.
I love how you mentioned, because you have the looks,
Yeah.
you attract men who also, obviously you're going to attract really gray looking men.
Sometimes. Then you have like those individuals who are like, I'm not trying to throw shade, but sometimes some people, I'm like, sir, I'm like, you must have dated a really pretty girl at some point because she fed your ego good.
Well, some girls love ugly guys.
No, you're not wrong.
But baby, we're not one of those. We're not one of those. So you can go back over there, and I'm gonna stay right here.
I'm gonna stay here.
I'm gonna stay here.
But we're not superficial either.
No, we're not. But it's crazy because I had a conversation with one of my really close friends, and I believe that the reason why men are so fixated on looks is because men don't like to go after women or men that have a very strong, well put together value or worth upon themselves.
Yeah.
They like to go for people who are easy.
1000%.
They like to go to people who are more into looks because they don't have to worry about the brains. They don't have to worry about, oh, I have self-worth. I have self-respect. They like to go people who are a little bit more toxic.
Yeah.
They like to go to people who are a little bit more insecure.
Yeah, 1000%.
It's easier for men to go for women and men because they don't have to work for it.
Exactly. And it's so interesting that you say that because so there was this TikTok video that I saw on TikTok, but I want to say that it was an excerpt from an actual YouTube video. I don't know what the name of the YouTube video is or like the channel, but you've probably seen these videos, but it's basically like a social experiment that gets ran. And this specific experiment was they had a line of girls lined up, like all really beautiful girls, and they had one guy, and it was supposed to be like a live version of Tinder. And so basically, like, it was a guy and all the girls were facing him in a line, and each girl would come up to him and he would basically say right or left. And he was, swiping his thing. And then this beautiful, like, honestly, conventionally, like, she was just beautiful, like beyond conventionally beautiful.
Like I've seen some of these videos.
Like, she was gorgeous. And he literally, like, stared at her for a second and said no. And everybody was like, what the heck? She was beautiful. Like, what did you do that for? And they asked him, it's like, hey, like, we want to go back to that one. Like, why did you say no to her? Like, anybody here would have said yes. And he said,
I would have said yes.
No, literally.
At that point.
She was amazing. She was beautiful. And he literally said, oh, it's because I didn't feel like I was going to be good enough for her. Like, I felt like I would have to work too much to keep her. And literally when they interviewed her, she said, oh, he looked really nice. Like, I would have given him a shot. And I feel like a lot of that time, and I don't know if it's a gender thing, but I feel like a lot of the time women, we tend to be very gracious in who we give our time to, because a lot of women, we operate from a big heart. And a lot of the times when a woman requires a man to step up to the plate and to, meet her where she needs to be met, they don't want to do it because maybe it goes on to speak on like who they are as a person, on their value. And I don't even necessarily want to say worth, because I feel like at our core, we're all inherently worthy. Like, just to be able to have life means we're worthy of it. Yeah. And it's never really a question about our worth. It's a question about our value. And if you're somebody who who has a low self-esteem, I really feel like that's because you don't know your own value. And if you knew your own value, you would be confident in that, and you wouldn't have a low self-esteem issue. And so in those scenarios, it's this individual, this person who was playing this game, he was very clearly insecure because he was going for the girls who he felt like, oh, I don't have to work too hard for them. Like, yeah, I can meet her needs. Like, this is cool. And that's a jerky thing to say, because it goes on to show it's just a projection of where he stands as a person.
Right.
You know, if he's not
it's a more disadvantage for him than anybody, because it just shows how insecure he is.
Yeah.
He shows that, oh, like, she has her shit together. I don't. But it also shows, like, you don't have the confidence enough to even work on yourself. That way you can match her energy at her level.
It's like you have an inability to grow, or to grow within a relationship.
If I was him, I would have said, honestly, like, I'll go on a date with you, but just, like, know that, like, I'm still trying to figure out where I am at with my confidence. And it is a little intimidating because I feel like you're such a confident woman.
Yeah.
And as a man, like, I want to be able to have that confidence.
Yeah.
And I feel like you said, women are really gracious, that they'd be like, that's not an issue for me.
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, just to add on, I don't know if you've watched.
But guys have egos, so they would never do that.
Yeah, no, I know, unfortunately. And I think that's like one of the biggest disadvantages is that, I don't know if it's just the way that men are brought up, but I do feel like that's a bigger problem in like that community is egos. They're so big, and I get it, you know, like on a primitive level, you're kind of trying to show off and like be like, I am like top notch, like I'm like at the top of the tier of the animal kingdom, and I get it, you know, like lions do that shit when there's 2 male lions, and like
I feel like that's how we were designed in a way, in a healthy way, like but like you said, like the whole lion analogy, like men, like they fight for their mate,
their territory,
their
mate.
territory,
exactly.
Not only in their land but their territory,
exactly.
And like it's crazy to see like those videos on Discovery Channel. I love
I
watching
love
them fight.
No, literally, I'm like, oh, I'm a
like,
nerd.
ooh, what's the tea? Ooh.
It's like the penguins.
The penguins, ooh, yeah. I don't like watching the ones where they like eat the other animals.
That makes me sad.
But like the territory, ooh, shit.
No,
I'll watch that one.
No, I saw this really cute one of like a penguin courting another penguin, and he literally like went and like found a pebble and like took this pebble to like this girl penguin and was like,
that's his form of flowers.
Yes, and I was like, oh, that's so cute.
I'll take a pebble at this point.
No, literally.
If a guy gave me a pebble, I'm like I know where you got that from.
No, literally. To add to that, I saw this other girl who posted a video.
Yeah.
And she's like, I went from not knowing where I was with this guy to now picking him up from the airport, and he just got back from Seattle, and he brought me a crab claw and a crystal, and I'm like, I found this to be such a unique way for him to tell me that he has autism, but I fuck with it, like this is cool. And I'm like, that's adorable, because like that's him with like saying like, I like you, like this is me courting you, like I'm a penguin. And I was like, that's adorable.
You got to be creative with how you show your love.
You really do. But yeah, I think, you know, ego is a big thing that a lot of men have to keep in check, because it holds you back from finding a relationship that's going to add value to your life. And I feel like, you know, I feel like more men should be striving to being in a power couple dynamic, because when you go into it with that mindset, you're recognizing that I'm here looking for a partner. Even looking at it like from a business perspective, when you have like a business that's a startup and you want to find people who you can collaborate well and work well with, and you grow the company together. It's the same with a relationship. You don't have to be perfect going into it. You don't have to have A through Z boxes checked. You just have to have a desire to want to grow and a humble heart.
I find it such a boss move.
Yeah.
When I see 2 power couples,
Period.
and everyone in the room knows.
Yep.
Oh, they're
on their
not
shit.
To be messed with.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
are the shit.
No, literally.
I feel like some people at the gym are like that.
Yes.
You see a couple and you just know, like,
yeah, they got them.
They're that bitch.
Literally.
They know who they are.
Yeah.
They know that no one's gonna ask them, are you almost done? Like, no, baby, don't come up to me and ask me that.
Like,
you're gonna sit there and wait.
Exactly. No, honestly. And like I think about it, like ASAP and Rihanna, like that to me is like, that's a power couple. Like they're on their own individual creative journeys, but you can just see that the way that they hype each other up, and you know, they're adding value to both of their lives. And like truthfully, I feel like that's why we don't hear anything about them really on social media, because they're keeping to themselves, they're grinding.
That's what makes them a power couple.
Exactly. 1000%.
Is their silence.
You don't have to flaunt, because when you know you're secure in your relationship, you don't need to have that. I understand people wanting to like share their love with others, but I don't feel like you need to be constantly like, oh, this is like my power couple move or whatever. Like you don't have to be constantly like showing it or whatever. It just people will resonate. People will pick up on that energy when it's there.
Yeah. I think my challenger for men, my therapist, and this will always stick with me literally till the day I die.
Yeah.
She always told me to be gentle on yourself.
Yes. Big one.
Being gentle, and I've told you this before, I've told you to be gentle on yourself.
Yeah.
It will, I feel like it's the stepping stone and the foundation of actually understanding who you are as a person. Because you're acknowledging, okay, I can't be so hard on myself.
Yeah.
I need to take a step back.
Yeah.
In a way, become outside of my body.
Yeah.
And really hone in on what's going on.
Yeah.
When you're gentle with yourself, you force yourself to enter into this rest of like, okay, I'm acknowledging that like what is currently happening is obviously not okay.
Yeah.
But I'm going to accept it for what it is.
Exactly.
And I'm going to implement change. And I think being gentle on oneself in any scenario is very beneficial
1000%.
because you alleviate the stress, you alleviate the heartache, the pain, the hardship of like what's next.
Yeah.
And
or the need to be perfect
or the
to
need
get it
to
right.
be perfect. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's my recommendation as for someone who is struggling with like codependency is one, just being gentle on yourself, creating an action plan of creating boundaries.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Boundaries are huge. I've watched this video on TikTok of a woman with her son, and they gave this whole scenario, but pretty much the video is about a boundary is someone that you set for yourself that doesn't require the other person to do any actions other than you.
Exactly.
Boundaries aren't requests.
Exactly.
They're something that you implement on yourself.
1000%.
For two people.
Exactly.
And so that was huge for me because I always found like, I felt like boundaries became kind of a trend.
They did. No, I really do. I feel like as we've gotten older, people have realized like, oh, boundaries is a good thing. Like being a little selfish is important to being a person, to being an like individual.
Like if two people are having conflict, the first thing they'll say is we'll set boundaries.
Yeah.
Well, that's not what they're really saying. What they're really saying is you need to start requesting to do X, Y, and Z.
Exactly.
Not knowing that a boundary is actually something that requires you to do all the work and they're just
sticking to it. Yeah.
They're sticking to it.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a boundary's mainly for you.
Exactly.
If you say, oh, I need to set a boundary, that's you wiring your brain that you need to do something to change a situation.
Yeah. And a lot of the time they're there to protect your values or to help you stick to your values. And at the end of the day, that's connected to your identity and that's connected to who you are as a person, your purpose.
Right. So I think setting yourself proper boundaries to alleviate this codependency brings a lot more balance, a lot more tranquility in someone's life.
Yeah, 1000%.
And a lot more peace.
Yeah, I agree. I think just to add to that, to like why we should be gentle, like a little reminder is this is also all of ours first time on earth. You know, this is my first time being 26. This is your first time being 25.
There's no instruction manual on how to live life.
Literally. And it's a scary part. It's a scary thing. And I feel like at some point, you know, and I've definitely heard this narrative been thrown around, like, you're 25, like you should know this by now, like you should be an adult. It's like, dude, this is my first time being 25. Like, what do you mean I should know? Like, just because we believe that just because we're grown ups, that therefore we have like all this emotional ability to regulate and that we just know what's right and what's, you know, beneficial to us. But in truth, we're all figuring it out as we go. It's our first time on earth. And I think remembering that and just recognizing like, you don't need to be mean to yourself. Like, truthfully, the world is already going to be mean to you at some point.
Oh, 100%.
Like, yeah, like don't add that, don't add to that negativity by being like, you know, your biggest critic. And and that way, just give yourself grace and be kind to yourself.
Right.
Yeah, I love this episode. It was so good.
I know, it's so good.
I loved it.
Well, thank you again for
No,
coming.
thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
I know that you're on your own journey
Yeah.
with podcasting.
I am, yeah.
How's it been?
It's been going really well. So my podcast, Can I Be Honest? It's primarily focused on unlocking your true potential through vulnerability. And it's primarily targeted for women. I mean, men can listen to it too, but truthfully, a lot of the things that I'm speaking on there is related to women, specifically women operating out of their wounded feminine energy, because I just feel like that's such a common trend nowadays. There's a lot of women out there, specifically who are women who are very smart, intelligent, and driven, who are just not having luck in relationships, or who are not, having the most success within like their work dynamic or so forth, because they tend to be individuals who operate out of like people pleasing, or they do lack that self-trust within themselves, or like that ability to know that they are capable of achieving whatever they'd like. And so that's what my podcast is centered around, is learning how to unlock that full potential, whether it be through vulnerability, through self-compassion, by healing your self-love for yourself and so forth. And that's mainly what I've been working on. That's been like my creative project. I've been diving deep into that. And I already have 3 episodes out. The 4th one's coming out this week, probably on Friday. And I'm enjoying the process. Like it's like a therapeutic moment for me too. It's helping me also see where I also need to work on. And that's something that I was very transparent about in my trailers, is recognizing like, or letting people know like, I'm not perfect. I don't have it figured out yet, but I'm trying, and I'm moving towards it.
That's one thing I've realized about me too, because as I'm like recording and filming and talking about like my past experiences, like I've realized too, like I'm still like healing and working on myself, just like everybody else.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing about healing, is like you're never gonna actually be fully healed, because like that would mean that you're perfect, and that's not gonna happen. It's not realistically, that's not gonna happen to us. But I think what healing is that you're learning how to cope better with those triggers, and you're learning how to navigate them and to not let them control you. But feel free to take a listen if you'd like. It's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Can I Be Honest podcast?
Can I Be Honest podcast? Exactly.
I love that title.
Thank you. Yeah,
It's
literally.
so cute.
This is so much fun. I loved it.
And that's the beauty, is you want to do something that's joyful.
Exactly.
Because it feels effortless.
Yeah, it adds purpose to your life, and I feel like when it's in alignment with who you are as a person, you will always just have that energy to want to create, and specifically for that project, and it'll just flow.
Yeah. Well, I love that.
Thank you.
And I definitely listen. It's so cute.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Well, that's it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.